Hello, everybody. Hello, and welcome to Honest HR Nitrous. I am Bill, the company's expert. This is the live stream I do a couple of times weekly where we talk about anything to do with recruitment, employment, job interviews, salary negotiation, networking, just any kind of employment type situation. That's what we talk about here. And the emphasis is on the reality of how this stuff actually plays out and not necessarily the theory behind how it should play out. So we can be honest here about like how this stuff actually works. I found there's a bit of a gap between, what people say and what actually transpires. So that's what we're here to talk about. The title of today's episode of Honest HR Nitrous is 2 Myths Recruiters Believe. These are 2 things that I've heard said many, many times. There's quite a few, actually, of these I'd like to do. Whether these are contradictions or these are things that people say or people act on that just aren't true. And if you are a job seeker right now, if you're trying to navigate the world of recruitment and selection and just employment, just trying to get a job, and you are going through recruiters and you're encountering these, I think we need to talk about them because they're very real. Okay, first of all, I'd like to thank my YouTube channel members. You guys are awesome. My super thanks donors. You guys are awesome. My Patreons and my participants. If you're here, that's great. You should see a chat box somewhere near my face. Get in the chat box and let me know what you're wondering about, what you're struggling with, and I will do my best to help you out. I really don't have much of an agenda of what I'm going to talk about. So I'm going to be responding to your questions and comments as we go, and hopefully that'll be enough to sort of keep us going, and we can learn something. Okay, so just to kick us off, let's get into this. 2 myths recruiters believe. Okay, I don't know if I really should do a disclaimer on this. I'm just going to say that there are some good recruiters out there. There's a few good ones. I don't think that's a surprise to people. The problem is that there's a lot of bad ones. And if you've been applying for jobs, if you've been, looking up posted jobs and responding to them with applications and doing all that, I'm sure you have probably encountered some bad ones. There are a lot of bad ones out there. There's some that are kind of okay, and then there's a few good ones. So it takes all kinds. And what I've seen is that some of the good ones, they operate at slightly higher levels. So, they're executive recruiters. Now, I know everybody throws that title around because everybody wants to be an executive recruiter, but the true executive recruiters out there, some of those are actually pretty good. And you do get better ones at lower levels too, but they tend to gravitate towards the top, in my experience. That's what I've seen. So, so welcome to EDSA. Is that how you say that? EDSA, EDSA. EDSA says, hi, thank you for one more chat. Yes, I'm back. I'm back for another round. On some of my slower days, I do these. So I actually kind of enjoy them. My problem is I just wake up in the morning and I think just, my God, why, oh, why is my hair so perfect? It's a curse and a blessing, really. But it's okay. Some people have a cowlick on their, on their hair, like a sort of swirl. Usually you get that on the top of your head, right? Well, I got it right on the side of my head, right here. It's like it swirls, It's always been really fun trying to do a hairstyle. But that's okay because CEO hair is something that more people need to talk about. David says, if a recruiter asks about what the characteristics of a good boss, is it a trap question? Are they looking for why the applicant left his previous job? It's a strategic question. And there's a few questions that people can ask. There isn't like a definitive list of these or anything, but there's a few questions you could ask. There's not necessarily a right or a wrong answer that's very clearly defined, but it's sort of a probe to see what someone's opinions are or what they'll say about it. And in so doing, they can expose some red flags, right? So if you've had a bunch of bad bosses or something, or a particularly bad boss, and they ask you this question and you just snap and you give it to them straight. You say, oh yeah, a sign of a bad boss is to check up on their employees, in any way at any time, because checking up on your employees is some kind of statement that you don't trust them. And, obviously that's not true. That statement in itself is false, and that could be a red flag. You obviously have a chip on your shoulder, and it might be very hard to work with you if you respond in that way. So it could be something like that. That would be my guess as to why they would ask a question like this. It takes all kinds. So sometimes, if you are dealing with a bad employer, okay, an employer that maybe is slightly unethical or is operating in they're operating in an area that, let's call it an ethical gray area. Okay, let's call that. They may ask you probing questions like this just to see if you're going to say, something totally benign that would interfere with how they want to operate, right? So it could be something like that too. I wouldn't assume that necessarily, but that could be what's going on, right? The more likely thing is that they just want to probe to see if there's going to be any red flags being your boss, right? If you mention something that they like to do, then obviously they're surfacing the fact that there could be some issues working with you, okay? So that would be my guess. Edsa says, do HR appreciate when we are honest on the things we don't know? In one interview I explained that I never saw the model they showed me and I could not explain. Well, listen, if you're asking about should you be honest, I mean, it depends what that involves. Are you going to reveal something really bad about yourself? Or are you going to reveal something very good? An honest answer can go both ways, right? Now, if you're talking about revealing what I think is not a good thing to reveal, and I also think you know the answer to that, right? You see, the thing is, the job interview is a sales pitch. That's what it is. You're trying to sell yourself. You're trying to say, look, you need to forget all the other candidates and hire me because I'm the best, right? That's what you're trying to convince them of, right? And what they're trying to do, at least a component of what they're trying to do, is they're trying to peel away that facade and try and look under the hood and see who you actually are. Like, I know you want us to think that you're perfect, but let's see if we can get more honesty here. Let's see what the real story is, right? That's the principle behind things like behavioral questions. If they say to you, do you have exceptional social skills? You'd say, oh yeah, totally. I totally have exceptional social skills. That's me, right? But then they say, well, tell me about a time you used exceptional social skills to solve a problem that only you could solve, or something like that. Then it becomes a bit harder to sort of fool them, as it were, right? To evade or to try and maintain this very positive first impression, right? So that's kind of what they try to do in job interviews, right? They try and peel away that facade and see who you really are. And so they would love you to be honest. The problem is that this is a sales pitch. It's based on first impressions, which are superficial, based on superficial things like how you look, how you sound, how much enthusiasm you show, how, your facial expressions. If you look like you're upset or you look like you're annoyed with them, you could be the most qualified person in the world, but they won't choose you, right? Because it's like, we're revealing who this person is, and that person is not easy to work with. And that's all based on superficialities that are applied to, how can we put this? Stereotypes, right? Because it says in their playbook that, the best employee, the one that will fit the best, is the one that shows a lot of enthusiasm for the role and knows a lot about your company and is very pleasant and likable and easy to work with in the job interview. That's how they will be on the job, and therefore they will work out better, and that's the person you should hire, right? So it's like, it's based on a stereotype. It's based on a whole series of assumptions, right? Now the problem is that a lot of these assumptions, which are based on stereotypes, a lot of the time they're false, right? And even if statistically they turn out to be correct more than 50% of the time, it's not much more than 50. You know what I mean? From what I've seen and my impressions. When I was teaching recruiters in university, I actually tried to pursue some of the theory behind some of these principles to see, if they were peer reviewed and if they had been proven with data and all this kind of stuff. And I could not find a lot. From what I gathered, they seem to be based on theories that have been detailed and explained in academic papers that are peer reviewed. But the backup, the data for like backing up those, I did not. I mean, it could exist, but I didn't see any of it. And a lot of these principles are contrary to what I've personally observed when you do job interviews and you do, stuff like that in the real world. So I tend to question these. I believe that they are not backed up by data, and it would not surprise me to learn that was the case, because a lot of them really seem flawed. And what they're trying to do is they're trying to get to know you without putting the time and resources in to actually get to know you. That's what they're trying to do. So anyway, this whole rambling long thing that I'm saying, it was to try and answer the question, should you be honest and give them what they want to know? Now, the thing is, one of the things they're trying to probe you for are your weaknesses, liabilities, things where you are not perfect. Now, unfortunately, the way this goes in the real world is that some people are pretty decent at evading a lot of these cookie cutter questions that are designed to probe you for your weaknesses. And so they don't give any weaknesses. The recruiter is left thinking, well, they might have weaknesses, but I didn't see any direct evidence of that in the interview. Other people, they surrender wholeheartedly to this. And they say, sure, here, well, to be perfectly honest with you, blah, 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 blah. And then they tell all their, things that give a bad first impression, shall we say. And who gets hired? Who gets selected? It's the candidate that does not give them the dirt, the undesirable things that shatter that good first impression. That's who tends to get hired. You know what I mean? So recruiters would love you to be totally honest and not have any kind of obfuscation about your reality, because they'll zero right in on your flaws, which is part of what they do, and make a note of it. And you know what I mean? They're very grateful to you for doing that, but it's not in your best interest to do that, in my opinion. The other thing is that, like, if you say one bad thing about yourself, as you probably also know, they will paint you with that brush, right? They will assume that that's all you are. So if you tell a story in the STAR format about a time that you failed because you did not have sufficient interpersonal skills to resolve a conflict or something, okay, you tell that story because they said, tell me about a time where a personal failing led to a problem at work or something like that, and you tell this story. They're going to make assumptions based on you. They're going to make the assumption that, okay, that is symptomatic of how you behave. So that wasn't an isolated incident. That was something that is a statement of how you operate on an ongoing basis, right? They're going to make that assumption, which is not necessarily true. This could have been a wild exception. You were telling the story, right? Then they're going to say, okay, if it was a problem in the past, it's going to be a problem for you in the future if we were to hire you. That's another assumption. Sometimes that's true, sometimes it's not, right? So there's a lot of assumptions here. And this is why sort of just giving them open and honest answers to some questions that can paint you in a bad light is a bad idea, because you might be honest about this thing. But the reality is that you're a highly capable person. They hear the story, they assume you're not a highly capable person, and then they don't select you, right? Does that make sense? That's kind of what I would say to that. There's a big, long-winded, rambling answer, but there you go. While we're waiting for more comments in the chat, I see there's 22 people here. I'm going to sort of get on with the subject of today's episode. The name of today's episode is 2 Myths Recruiters Believe. This is episode number 17. Let's get into that. Now, I've already said some recruiters are good and some are bad. In my experience, there's a lot of bad ones out there. There's a few good ones. Hopefully, you've had the pleasure of dealing with a few of the good ones, but I'm likely to bet that most people have met the bad ones. Here's the first myth, okay? This is something that I've heard several recruiters say that I personally take exception to. That is that if you don't use it, you lose it. This is with regard to your qualifications. So let's say you have some education, or you have a skill, or you've had experience doing a certain task or job in the past. But it's been, say, 5 years since you got that education or you applied it. It's been 5 years since you used those skills, or it's been 5 years since your experience doing a particular task or duty ended. Okay? Recruiters believe that in that case, your education or skills or experience no longer applies. It's as if you don't have them. That's how it's been communicated to me. I've heard that from several different people independently. I've heard that from people on the internet. I've heard that from people in real life. I've heard that from people. I've read it in articles. That's just not true. It's a fallacy. I can understand how some people might think this. And listen, in the real world, everything is going to be true some of the time. Everything is going to work some of the time, right? But saying that applies generally across the board to everyone in all situations, that's blatantly false. Okay? This idea that if you have something that you did 10 years ago, you should leave it off your resume because it doesn't count. I've heard that several times. I've also seen that in job interviews that I've been present for, where a candidate will have done something, but it won't be in their most recent job. It's their second most recent job. So it's been a few years since they did it. And the assumption is that, those skills are old, so they pretty much no longer exist. And I disagree with that. I think it's common knowledge. I think it's I can't think of words today. Demonstrable. It's demonstrated out in the real world that people have these skills even if they're over 5 years, and that the learning curve has been overestimated by a lot of recruiters and hiring managers. I think they believe in the myth of a 100% turnkey employee, someone who can start and on day one, they're fully productive. I don't believe that. I've never seen that. I don't think that exists. I think that there will be a learning curve or an onboarding period, for a certain amount of time. And if people have skills that are over 5 years old, or education that's over 5 years old that you need for your job, you can summon that back quite easily. It's just that the learning curve might take a little bit longer, but it's there, and people who have those skills should not be discounted. One thing I'd like to point out is that why are a lot of executives old? If this is true, okay, that if you haven't used something, anything over 5 years old is obsolete, and if you've been out of practice for 5 years, it might as well not exist. Why then are senior positions where you have to make decisions usually filled by older people who have long careers in a certain industry? By this principle, they wouldn't have an advantage. because anything they did more than 5 years ago doesn't count, right? It's been a long time since they were on the entry level. It's been a long time since they were at the mid-level. You know what I mean? More than 5 years. So this is a myth, I think, that a lot of recruiters perpetuate. And if you have skills that are older than 5 years, don't let anyone tell you that they no longer apply or something. It's insulting to hear this, I think, from recruiters. Right? You have all these accomplishments and they say, but those are 5 years old. I think it's ridiculous. I don't know if anyone else has had an experience like that where you've gotten some feedback from a recruiter or maybe possibly a hiring manager. Maybe you've gone down your resume with them and they've said stuff like that. They said but this is 5 years ago. This is 8 years ago. Sorry, it doesn't apply. So I'm not sure if that strikes a chord with anyone, but that's the first myth that I'd like to expose today. That's just not true. Does it result in a longer learning curve? Yes. Do recruiters and hiring managers, especially recruiters who don't know the subject matter of the role, do they overestimate the learning curve? Yes. But the skills are very much alive, and the education is very much still valid, and the experiences are real. That's what I put to everyone. So if you have found yourself in this, let me know. Let me know in the chat. Okay, this is primarily a interactive live stream, so get in the chat. Let me know what your thoughts are, because I'm here primarily to react to those and help you out if you have any questions. I have one other thing I'm going to say, and I'll say that now, but hopefully we can get more activity in the chat. Edsa, thank you, says, do HR from previous employee share information with potential recruiters? I'm struggling with the grammar there. Are you asking if recruiters from previous employers share information with recruiters for current positions? Is that what you're asking? If so, as a general rule, no, they don't, because they are not connected, right? But they can do if you intentionally set up a situation where it makes it easy for them to do so, right? So, for example, you say employer, sorry. Yeah, okay, so HR. HR means human resources. I assume you mean recruiter, a person who works in recruiting candidates to become employees, right? Now, the big danger is not necessarily the recruiter, but it's your current boss. That's where there's danger, okay? So if you are looking for a job right now and you are contacting recruiters and applying for jobs, and some of those recruiters are getting back to you, okay? One of the things that they may prompt you for somewhere in the process is references, and do we have permission to contact your current boss or your current employer? Okay. Now, the reason why usually they specifically ask that question is because if you are currently working, obviously you don't want some recruiter you're dealing with where you're exploring getting a new job. You don't want that recruiter contacting your current boss and revealing to your current boss, oh yeah, this employee of yours, they're looking for another job. Maybe you haven't told your current employer this, and most people won't have, because it is bad for you to tell your current boss that you are looking for another job. That usually results in them wanting to get rid of you quickly before you leave. That's usually how that goes. Okay? So that's why a lot of recruiters will specifically ask for permission from you before they contact your current boss, okay? Now, some recruiters don't, but the way you make it so that they can't, or it's very hard for them to do so, is to not give your current boss's name and contact information. Don't use them as a reference. Don't indicate you maybe indicate the company you work for, but not the name of your boss, not the department you work in, right? Because if you give them all that information, it makes it very possible for them to pick up the phone, call your boss, and talk to them and reveal that you're looking for another job and possibly share information. That's a real thing. Now, the other kind of variant of this is if you are dealing with multiple recruiters for multiple jobs, okay? And let's say one recruiter has offered you a job. So you've got an offer, right? It is possible for people to then sabotage that job offer. Okay? Your current boss could do this if they wanted to. Most bosses won't do this because they're decent human beings, but some of them will. Well, what they'll do is if they find out that you've just received a job offer from that particular company that goes through this particular recruiter, okay? Let's say you told them this. You said, hey, Mr. Boss Man or Boss Lady, I need a raise because if you don't give it to me, I'm leaving. I've got another job offer from this specific person at this specific company for this specific amount, right? You shouldn't say that because then your boss can call up that recruiter and say something like, they do this, right? They say, hello, yeah, I think you should be aware that this employee who works for me, yeah, they're an alcoholic. They've got a lot of personal issues. They're a compulsive liar. And, they're really not that very good at their job. I was thinking of firing them soon anyway. So I just thought it would be only fair to give you a heads up and give you a warning about this employee, right? None of that's true, by the way. The recruiter, upon hearing this, says, well, thank you very much for telling me. It's great that I now know this because I had no idea. I think based on what you've told me, I'm going to rescind my offer to this employee because it sounds like it's probably not something I want to pursue. So thank you. Right? So this way your current boss sabotages your job offer, right? Now the way to prevent that, of course, is to not give not tell your boss about the recruiter and not tell your recruiter about your boss. Don't give them names and contact information. Okay? This is something that does happen. Your boss doesn't want you to leave, or maybe they're just bitter that you're leaving. They take it as some kind of personal rejection, so they want to get back at you, and they might want to get back at you on a personal level. They also might want to get back at you for the disruption you're going to cause by leaving. So this is why we don't share that information between the two parties. All you have to say is, I work at this company. If they say, who is your boss? I say, well, I don't disclose that because I don't want my boss finding out that I'm planning to leave, as you can understand. Okay, so that's the deal. So hopefully that makes sense. That's a good question there, Edsa. Okay, I'm going to get into the second myth. I've got two myths. That's the title of this episode. What was it again? It was the two myths recruiters believe. Okay. It's not the only two myths. It's two of many, but here's another one. Okay. The myth number 2 is you can only do what you've done before, because, and this is generated by the metric years of experience, right? That's the first question they have to you when you say you're qualified for a role. They're going to say, well, how many years of experience do you have for this in this role? And if you answer 0, I've never done it before, then they're going to conclude, how could you possibly know what to do if you've never done this before? How could you possibly believe you're qualified to do this job if you've never done it before, right? Tell me if you've heard that one before. It's a myth. Now listen, like I said, in the real world, everything happens some of the time. So obviously there are some jobs where this does not apply to. If you want to be the senior resident brain surgeon in a hospital, well, if you've never done brain surgery before, you probably will not be good in that job, right? Yes, true. But that's a highly regulated, very senior position that involves a lot of hands-on experience. Okay, so in that case, this doesn't apply. But I would say most jobs that are certainly like, entry level, worker level, professional level, I'd say that you could do a half decent job never having done the job before. There are a lot of highly capable people out there. There's a lot of very trainable people. And there's a lot of transferable skills that a lot of people in HR don't seem to have any conception of in my experience. Maybe some of them do, and that's great. But this is a very real thing. Just because you've never done something before doesn't mean that you can't do it. There's been so many examples of that dispel that myth. Okay? Okay, so to get into this, the myth is that you can only do what you've done before, and that years of experience is a good metric. To know how good you are at something, years of experience is the metric to go by. I would put it to you that years of experience more often is not a good metric. And the problem with this thinking is that it assumes that people are completely untrainable and that they can't deal with a situation they've never encountered. They don't have the thinking skills to be able to solve problems, that they've never encountered before, or in a different context. You know what I'm saying? I think this is crap, to be honest with you. I think that in general, recruiters tend to overestimate job challenges for the jobs that they're recruiting for. And if this were true, no one would ever be able to change careers. What do you think of that? Because changing careers, by definition, you haven't done the thing you're moving to, right? You might have worked for 15 years, I don't know, being a scientist, whatever you do, 15 years experience. And you decide, you know what? I hate being a scientist. I hate working in a lab. It's boring. The people are snotty. They're arrogant. They don't treat me with respect. I'm very extroverted, but I'm here alone by myself all day and it makes me feel depressed, right? Whatever. I want to change careers. I want to be a school teacher. I want to teach high school. I'll be surrounded by people. I've got great communication skills, but they're being wasted in my current job. I'd like to go and teach science to high school kids. So that person goes and tries to get a job. And they're told, how could you possibly teach science? Have you ever taught before? And the person would say, no, I haven't taught before. But I have kids that are the same age, and I've been around kids before, and I know science, and I have great communication skills, and I'm very likable, And most recruiters will say, well, I'm sorry, but you have no teaching experience, so I don't think you're a good fit, right? That's usually how that goes. The only way to change careers, as hopefully everybody knows, is to not go through recruiters, but to go to hiring managers, because the hiring manager will give you a chance, right? If you talk to the principal of a school, say. Now, this only obviously applies in industries that are not regulated. Like if you have to be licensed to teach, which I think you do, obviously that doesn't apply. But most professions and most industries are not regulated. You don't have to have a license to hold that particular job. It's just a question of, are you qualified, right? So you talk to a principal, the principal says, well, look, you do have a lot of credential here in science. Having met you and had some conversations with you, you seem like a very likable person with great communication skills. I've had no problems understanding you or relating to you. I like you. You're a very charismatic person. You hold my interest. You seem to be very passionate about teaching. And when I ask you questions about teaching, how you would do this and how you would do that, you seem to have good answers for them. You've thought about this quite a lot. So you know what? I'm going to give you a chance. We have a evening class, remedial science class. It's like 2 days a week. We're looking for an instructor. Are you interested? That kind of thing. And that way you get your foot in the door. And then after teaching there for a little bit, maybe a couple of months. Maybe the principal, maybe other people, they sit in on your class, they see, hey, like you're a really good teacher and you're doing a great job. And then they'll consider you for a more permanent full-time teaching thing, right? You know, that's usually how people change careers. And incidentally, this is something that's happened to me. That's how I got into teaching, by the way. Not in high school, but in college and in university. So, I mean, this does happen. You know, I'd never done any teaching before. I applied for a teaching job. I was like, whatever. And, you know, they gave it to me. And they gave it to me because they brought me in. They said, hey, like, teach us something. And I said, sure. And, you know, I did a bit of that. And then I was asked to do some more teaching at a university. So I did like an informational interview, and I went down with them, and they offered me that too. And I mean, I'm not a career teacher. I don't have any degrees in education or whatever. You know, I have experience, not teaching, but experience in the subject matter. So that worked out. Now I mean, this isn't particular to me. Many people do this. Many people change careers like this, but they do it by not applying to a posted job and then going in with 1,000 other candidates and going head to head with 1,000 other candidates, competing on a level playing field. They go and they talk to a hiring manager. They reach out and they say, hey, you know, tell me a bit about teaching and tell me how, you know, what are the challenges and all this kind of thing. And they say, you know, well, you know, I've thought about it on and off, and I thought I might be a very good teacher. You know, how would one go about doing it, kind of thing. And then it's that way in that works, because people see the skills demonstrated rather than a job interview where you don't demonstrate anything, you just talk about how you have things. How do you say this? Pofcross? P of cross? Pofcross? That sounds familiar. The problem with the current corporate hiring is that it's not interested in training its personnel. It's only interested in hiring someone who can come in and do the work right away based on experience. Yeah, exactly. Officially, that's what it does. And that's the single reason why a lot of organizations have performance issues with their workforce. I was on the head of this, the sort of right where the rubber meets the road of this issue for several years, because a problem that we had was that you want to train your employees, but training costs money. And so therefore, the money has to come from somewhere. So either at the end of the day, after you train your employees, you then can't pay them as much because you have to recoup the cost of the training, right? Or, you know, you have to absorb those costs. You have to eat those costs some other way, right? Now, the problem is that you have one company in an industry that believes in training their employees, and so they train their workforce. They give them a lot of skills that are quite valuable in that industry. Then the employees find that they're working for pay that is lower than what a competing company could pay, right? So company A trains their employees, and then company A pays everybody $50 an hour or something. I don't know. Company B in the same industry does not train their employees, therefore they have less cost, therefore they can afford to pay their employees more. So they pay $60 an hour. So employees aren't stupid. They get hired with company A. They go through the training. They get fully trained. Then, would you stay at company A and make $50 an hour, or would you go apply to company B, have them hire you, and then because you're highly trained, you're desirable, they want you, and then you get paid $60 an hour to work for them? So the company that does the training loses, and the company that doesn't do any training wins. They end up having all the talented, highly trained employees that were trained by their competitor. You know what I mean? So this was the problem. Now you can try and find ways around it. You can say to employees, look, we're going to train you, but you have to sign this contract saying that if you then leave within like a certain amount of time, you have to refund part of the costs of the training, you know, because we just trained you and now you're like leaving, right? So, I mean, you can do that, but there's problems with every sort of thing you could do. That's the problem with this, right? So what a lot of companies are doing is they're saying like, well, we are not interested in training anybody. We are just going to hire people that are, they come already trained, right? And there's a lot of problems with that. A lot of problems. It's also partly a reaction to the fact that employees are jumping around more. So what's the incentive to training your workforce when you know that most of your workforce is going to be gone in 2 years? Why would you put the money and time into that? You know what I mean? That's their perspective. Right? Now, what do you do as an employee? Well, you go where they train you, and then you just go and follow the money, whoever will hire you. Everybody's looking out for themselves. So it really is a problem. But this whole idea of the turnkey employee, that's got a lot of issues. And it's not helped by when hiring decisions are made by people who think that people can't be trained. You know what I mean? The skills you have now are all the skills you're going to have, and anything that's over 5 years old doesn't count. Like, you know what I'm saying? That creates a ton of problems. Fortunately, people inside the company don't share those beliefs. Like your boss. They know that, okay, well, you have this education, that still is valid. That still makes you, possibly more valuable than a coworker who doesn't have anything like that education or something, or you worked at this company, you had this experience, you were assembling rockets. Well, that, gives you an edge on being able to assemble cars because, you did this high precision work. I mean, you are obviously capable of that level of skill, right? Okay, you did it 10 years ago, but it still applies. That's where you learn to assemble things in that environment, right? So you're one of the better people to assemble like car stuff because, when it comes to high precision stuff, you have the chops to do it. They know this, right? A recruiter would devalue those skills and say, well, those don't apply. They're 10 years old, so it doesn't count. They wouldn't pay you anymore. They wouldn't give you the job based on that. You know what I mean? Anyway, I'm doing a lot of talking here. Get in the chat. Let me know what you guys are thinking about any of this, or let me know if you have questions or you have examples or you have other ideas you want to float. We could talk about it. Thank you to David and to EDSA for participating so far, and Pofcross. I'm sure I'm saying that wrong. These screens that I've got here, they're a throwback to when this software I use actually worked, where you could see all your comments like live on the screen, like over here. This wouldn't be a black box. It would have everybody's comments streaming by. So, but the software is broken. It doesn't work anymore. So I have to make do. Here in the blue box here, if you're wondering what that blue box is, that's where you can see comments once upon a time in the chat activity going by. Okay, Pofcross says, people wouldn't leave if the management acts with integrity and respect towards its employees. Based on my experience, whether there is a high turnover, it is largely due to poor management. Yeah, I would agree with that. Poor management it's interesting because, don't get me wrong, a lot of managers suck. They really do. Let's be honest about this. The biggest thing, I think, is that they are lacking in the discipline to do proper interpersonal communication. It takes energy to be polite to people. It takes energy to make people feel happy to deal with you. It also takes discipline for you to employ that stuff whenever you deal with people. It's hard to do that when you're stressed out, when you're upset about something and you need an answer now and there's no time for pleasantries. You know what I mean? But yet, what I'm going to refer as pleasantries, that's just treating people in a decent way. Don't bark at them. Don't order them around like a slave. You know what I mean? You have to treat them like a human being. That takes energy, that takes skill, that takes discipline to be able to remember to do it. Right? Especially when the pressure's on and when you're under a lot of stress, it's not easy to do. But so many managers, don't realize they should even be trying to do that. And B, a lot of other managers don't even have the skills to be able to treat people properly in the first place, you know? And that's a result of what happens when you promote people into a management role without them having any training on how to manage people, you know? I'm not saying that, everyone with an MBA is awesome, because they're not. There's a lot of people with MBAs that are idiots. I'll be the first to admit that I have an MBA, but I mean, I'd like to think I'm not an idiot. There's a lot of people that have MBAs and they're terrible. They're terrible to people to work for, and they're not very good at what they do. And part of that is they just don't have the interpersonal skills component of what you should have if you're a manager, especially if you're managing people. You can maybe get away with that in things like project management, where you manage projects, not people, or assets, but not people. Sometimes you can get away with that. But if you're like a people manager and you don't understand how to deal with people and how to treat them properly, you got a lot to learn, and you're going to be bad. You're going to drive people away, and you're not going to get good results. So yeah, I would agree with that. Just beware, Puffcross, because a lot of people who have never been managers, it's very easy for them to point the finger and say, all the problems here, they're all because of you, right? When you don't understand what they do and what pressure they're under and what constraints they're under, it's easy to blame, your immediate boss or whatever for everything under the sun that you don't like about the role or the company or whatever. Sometimes they're just as oppressed as you are. And I know what I'm talking about here. They're made the figurehead for they're the go-to person for if anything's wrong, but yet their hands can sometimes be tied in ways that you don't see. Look at the turnover for some of those jobs. We can see that, it's some of those jobs are very stressful. And it's like a no-win situation. I've been in those before. TTC, what percentage-wise and how would you go about asking for when for a salary increase? Well, it depends on your situation. In order to know what to do, you got to know what your goals are and what your situation is. I don't know any of those things. Are you working for minimum wage? Are you, working at the executive level? I mean, what are we talking about? The other thing is that why would you ask? This is the thing. This is going to sound overly harsh, but it's not. I don't mean to be offensive. Don't take it as offensive. I'm just trying to make a point. Why would you ask for more money? It seems empty. If you're already working in a job for, say, 50, that's your wage, 50, but you decide and you've been working for 50 for a couple of years, you decide to go to your boss and say, I would like 60. Okay? Now, here's what you may not be aware of. Every single person who has a job, I wouldn't say every single person, let's say 90% of people that have jobs currently believe that they are underpaid. And this is across every job, from the bottom to the top, every industry, every country. It's pretty much a universal belief for about 90% of people that have jobs. They all believe that they should be paid more because they're worth more. Okay? What that means is that if you are a manager and you have 10 employees under you, 10 direct reports, 9 of those 10 believe they should be paid more. Now, of those 9 people, probably about half at least have communicated that to you and said, I should get paid more. Can I have a raise? Can you, seriously, can you give me a raise? I feel that, and then they insert whatever seemingly logical argument. And then at the end of the day, it's just, I deserve more money. I want more money. Now, okay. So first of all, the problem is that generally speaking, these are all generalizations because I have no specifics to go on in this case. Generally speaking, bosses don't have the ability to just pay out more money to everyone. Their budgets are tight. So the general rule, more often than not, it's not that they don't want to pay you more, it's that they can't. Okay, they are under constraints. Usually it's the opposite. They are under constraints to do more with less, rather than, here's more, Now produce the same result. You know what I mean? Those employees that you already have working for you, keep them working for you, but let's just pay them more, right? Usually what bosses are specifically tasked with is, we're going to give you less, now produce more results, get more productive, right? And they have to deliver on this, or sometimes they're fired. Their job depends on it, right? So that's what you don't see. The other thing is that, forget about what your boss's perspective is. Look at the situation. You are already working for 50. You've stayed there working for 50, thus demonstrating that you are worth 50. If you were grossly underpaid, all things being equal, someone else would have offered you a much better job and you'd have taken it by now, right? So you've demonstrated that you're worth 50 by the fact that you've stayed there working for 50 for quite a while. Now you're turning around and saying, well, no, I think I'm worth 60. Now, all that leads to this. The boss's default response, all things being equal, is going to be, well, I think you're bluffing. You may feel that you're worth that amount, but you're not. How you feel is not a determinant of how much you're worth. You know, I'm not worth what I feel I'm worth. I'm worth what the world will pay me, right? I could feel that I'm worth $1 million a year, but if nobody's lining up to pay me, if nobody's even lining up to pay me $100,000 a year, how can I say that I'm worth $1 million? What evidence do I have to back that up? You know? This all sounds very pessimistic, doesn't it? Well, here's what you do, okay? If you feel honestly that you're underpaid and that you're worth more, okay? Maybe that's true. Now, if it is, go out and validate it, prove it, test it. Get an offer in your hand for 60. You're being paid 50 now? You think that's too low? Get an offer in your hand for 60. Now, some people will be able to do this because they are in fact underpaid, right? Now, if these people are willing to pay you 60, now you have a choice. You could either leave and go and get 60 from working for them, or you could go back to your boss and you could say, here's the deal. I believe I'm underpaid. You're paying me 50. I believe I'm worth 60, but I actually believe I'm worth a little more. So I would very much like for you to give me a raise to, say, 65. Do you feel you can do that? Or could you at least give me, say, 60? It would persuade me to keep on working here, you know, and I would be motivated to do a great job. Okay, now, as I said, their initial probable response is probably going to be no, sorry, because they think it's a bluff, right? Because most employees bluff. So that's what they're going on. So you say, okay, no problem. Listen, I understand completely. No hard feelings. Here's my notice. Okay. And then you back that up. And then, you know, usually they're taken aback by this. And then you follow through. You work your notice and you leave. Now, if they honestly can't pay you more than 50, you'll just end up leaving and going to the company that pays you 60. If they could, in fact, pay you more than 50, excuse me, if they could pay you more than 60, if they wanted, and they honestly did feel that you were a real asset to them. Oh my God, my throat. Excuse me. If they felt that and they were able to pay you more, then they have the option of turning around and saying, wait, let's not do anything hasty. Okay, they just wanted to see that you weren't bluffing because you actually worked your notice and then you didn't come to work, you didn't flinch or you know, try to undo anything. And they call you the first day after your notice period when you're at home. And they say, come on back, you got your money. Because they know that you're cheaper to have as an employee than for them to go out and try and recruit someone to replace you, train them, and they would probably have to start that person at 60 because that is the market price now, right? So that's usually how these things play out in my experience. Bosses don't just give you more money because you ask for it, even if you're an honestly awesome employee that they do value and they do know you're being underpaid. Their first thing will not be to grant that. They'll try and resist. There are some exceptions, but that's the general rule. And you have to force their hand. And if you are worth what you believe you are worth, then you should be able to prove that, validate it by getting other opportunities lined up. Okay? And then whichever way it works out, you're going to be working for 60 for somebody. Okay? That's how that stuff works. You never know. Sometimes you work in a place where your boss doesn't think very highly of you. You're actually quite valuable, but for whatever reason, they don't see you like that, you know? And you could make more money working for somebody else that actually sees your value, you know? This would be a way of exposing that. Okay, so who is that? Was that Popcross? Popcross? No, that was TTC. So hopefully that makes sense, TTC. David says, when you are invited to interview, does it mean that you are technically competent, or they may also challenge your skills? Oh, great question. Great question, David. If you are invited down for an interview, okay, what that means is that on paper, okay, on your application, usually like your resume, whatever it was that you sent them, right, on paper, you look like you are fully qualified and you could do the job. That's what they are indicating by the fact that they've invited you down for an interview. Okay? Maybe you don't have the social skills, or you have the wrong personality, or you just don't click on a personal level. Like, you know, there could still be problems, but on paper, on your resume, it looks like you're fully qualified. That, you see, they would never invite someone who's not qualified down to a job interview, because even if they love that person, even if they're like the greatest person ever to deal with, it doesn't matter because they don't have the requirements. You know, you need to have this education and this skill. And if you don't have that, it doesn't matter how wonderful you are, you can't do the job, right? So there's no reason for them to invite someone down to an interview that is not qualified on paper, right? So the only people they invite down to job interviews are ones that look good on paper. Now, the question is, what do you like as a person? Okay, that's one big question. Another question is what you put in paper, is that valid? I mean, some people, their resume is a complete fabrication. It's a lie, right? You would want to try and verify some of that, right? So these are some of the reasons that we do job interviews, right? In theory, it's to check up on some of these things, right? Okay, so you go down to an interview, despite what they say, they could say things like, oh, you're overqualified, or some stupid crap like that. You know, it's like, well, that's clearly not the case, because if you honestly felt that I was overqualified based on my resume, why the hell did you bring me down here? What, to waste both our times? You know what I mean? Like, it's stupid. Like, some of those things that they'll say to try and get a reaction out of you are blatantly false by the fact that you're here, right? So that's what it means to be brought down to an interview. If you get called down for a job interview after having sent in an application, and they say, well, you're clearly not qualified for this, you know, and they say that at the beginning, right, before you've really had a chance to tell them anything, it's obviously a tactic, because they don't believe that. Either that, or they can so stupid they could barely tie their shoes. I mean, you could get both. But you know what I'm saying? What would be the point of bringing somebody that's not qualified down to a job interview? Like, how is that a good use of your time? You know? That's what it means. Yeah, it means that you're technically competent. Now, assuming that everything you've put on the paper is correct, is accurate. You know, what they want to say is like, well, it looks good, but we want to verify. So you say here that you have a degree in engineering, right? Okay, well, let's ask you a pretty basic engineering question, and, you know, you should be able to answer, right? If you can't answer a very basic engineering question, then something weird's going on. You know, you say you've got a degree in it, but yet you can't answer the most simple thing about, you know what I mean? They might want to do some of that. And sometimes we see that in job interviews where they want to test your knowledge. In certain industries, that happens, but not in other industries, right? Depends what we're talking about. in highly regulated industries, you usually don't get a lot of that. You know, like if you're a lawyer or something, people aren't going to make you take an aptitude test if you're like a fully qualified lawyer with courtroom experience. You know what I mean? Like if you've been called to the bar and you're a member of the same professional organization that these people are a member of, they're not going to give you skill testing questions and all this aptitude test. It's unnecessary, right? But if you're in an industry where there's all kinds of weird educational qualifications floating around that, you know, people are kind of suspicious of these, like, is this like a diploma mill type thing, or are these really that valuable? So they don't know, so they'll have more of the aptitude tests to see, like, okay, you know, how much do you actually know? Right? But that varies by industry. Yeah, and they may challenge your skills. Sometimes they'll even do it in a rude way sometimes, because there's a lot of incompetent recruiters out there, or even hiring managers. In my experience, hiring managers in operations are the worst for that. You know, engineer types, technician types, they're the worst for that. They have the least social skills, like generally speaking, and they show it. They'll say some pretty blunt stuff. And I've been on the receiving side of that early in my career, where you go down and you're interviewed by like a chief operating officer or something, and says, like, you know, they're looking at your resume and they're going like, you know, well, you clearly don't understand this, and you clearly don't have this. And it's like, what? It's right there, you know? Or they're being what seems to be like really obtuse and saying, well, you know, I understand that you got this law degree thing, but, you know, show me you know how to use a dictionary. There's no mention of knowing how to use a dictionary under the skills section of your resume, you know? So I don't think, you know, you'd really have the language skills to do this job. You know, they'll say this stupid crap to you, to your face, which is insulting, you know? It can be viewed as insulting. And they're doing it sometimes because they're idiots, and sometimes because it's strategic, you know, just to see if testing for a couple of things. Right? So I don't know if you've had the misfortune of being in a job interview where they've done that. Right? And by the way, the general rule, if you want to really look like a pro at this kind of stuff, is your answer, you start out like here's something to practice, by the way, for you guys. Your answer starts out by agreeing with them. Because they're expecting you to go, what? You know, and then get all upset about it. Like, you know, what are you talking about? I got this and this, and, you know. If you want to be a master of communication, you start by agreeing. You say, you know, absolutely. You know, I can totally understand how that's not obvious at all. You know, and you're right. You bring up a point. I mean, you know, do they ever mention vocabulary where they talk about like legal qualifications? That's not something you hear very often, you know. But listen, you know, the thing is that when, you know, I did my bar exam, you know, the vocabulary requirements are actually very high. And this is something that, you know, you can find out quite easily. You can verify this. Those were brought in by the last dean, you know, as far as I know, of the law faculty, you know, here in, you know, our city or whatever. And, you know, you can see that. And they actually have quite high requirements for the vocabulary. You really need to know your stuff. So that's what I do have, you know. So even though that isn't really explicitly stated on there, you know, you can be sure that I have that. You know, or something like this. I'm just making it up off the top of my head. But start out by agreeing. And then you look like a genius, you know. You look like, you know, you're the most easy person in the world to deal with. That even if they bring almost an accusation to you, they'll still... you know, you won't be rude. You'll still have a pleasant conversation. You'll end up persuading them and winning them over, and they go, "Oh, you know, that makes a lot of sense," right? So that takes practice, by the way. I had to really practice that one, and I'm not perfect at it today by a long shot, but I have done that, and it goes over really well, generally speaking. I'm the type of person that gets upset, or that you have to downplay that, right? That's why sometimes people will laugh, you know, ha 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 ha, kind of thing, right? To kind of clear the air, to kind of diffuse the tension a little bit, and then absolutely, I can totally see how that happens. That actually has been brought to my attention before. Blah 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 blah, and then you just go into it with a smile on your face, right? And they will conclude that you're like the most awesome, capable person if you can do that. Lysolana Lorwyn, I have seen you before or heard from you before. What if the employer asked, where did they get the idea that they deserve higher pay? They can ask all kinds of things. The thing is, once again, this is something I've said many, many times recently, is that negotiation is not about persuasion. You know what I mean? A lot of people seem to think that negotiation is about persuading the other person to come around to your way of thinking. It's not. Absolutely not. It's about having other options. So it's like, okay, maybe you're playing some kind of game where you're pretending to be obtuse and you're refusing to acknowledge that I'm worth, say, more than minimum wage or something. So maybe it's an act, right? Or maybe you honestly believe that I'm only worth minimum wage, even though I've got a 20-year career and I've got all these, things on my resume, all these, very impressive positions of responsibility and all this, But I really don't care what you think. If you're prepared to offer me something that, like, what I'm worth, then I'm willing to entertain it. If you're not prepared to offer me something that what I'm worth, then we have nothing more to discuss. You know what I mean? Like that's the reality, right? And I'm not going to engage in this sort of sales pitch to try and sell you on the idea that I'm worth this. If you're saying very suspicious things that lead me to conclude that it's either a strategic move on your part, or you're pretending to be obtuse about it, or you honestly just have a warped view of my value. You know what I mean? If you think I'm worth the same amount as someone who pumps the gas, no offense to those people, but you know what I mean? Where I've had a 20-year career, then I don't know if I really want to work with you. So I really don't care about what you think. You know what I mean? So it's very simple. It's not about persuasion. And any attempt to get into that kind of discussion in, say, a job interview, I would shut down. You see, this is the problem. They are no longer your friend when you discuss salary, because you have conflicting goals. They want to get you for cheap. You want them to pay as much as they can, right? So they're not going to work with you. They actively want you to believe that you're worth nothing. I did a video on this recently. You know what I mean? So I wouldn't entertain any of that. I wouldn't go into any of this. I wouldn't answer that question. I wouldn't give them what they're looking for. Like, I would just say, like, well, based on my skills and experience and based on the caliber of job offers and other opportunities I've received recently, I am concluding that I'm certainly worth all of this, and that's what the evidence supports. And there you go. I would shut up. It's hard to believe, but I would shut up at that point. You don't need to fill the silence with talking. And if they say, well, we think blah, blah, you say, okay, that sounds perfectly fair. I guess that's just the difference between us. But I wouldn't get into it with them, because it's not going to end well. You know what I mean? And it's irrelevant. Either it's a tactic to try and get you to lower your expectation, or they're being honest, in which case it doesn't make sense for you to do. You know what I mean? I would pursue other job opportunities if you honestly feel that you're worth a lot more and you're not desperate to get this job. You know what I'm saying? Anyway, that's what I think about that. But that's a valid point. I mean, there are employers that play all these kinds of games, and they do it because it works. because a lot of people don't understand these concepts. And so, they think, oh, well, this employer says that they don't think I'm worth that much, so maybe I should ask for less. And once again, the employer is going, right? Can I do that well? That's not something I do very often, but if I did, I would do it live on the air. That's what they're thinking. They're thinking like, great, we're getting this person to believe that they're worth less, so they'll be happy with less, so that we can offer them less and they'll take it. And then we've got this talented, valuable person working for us for very little. We look like heroes. We now have enough money left over in our budget. We could hire a whole other employee if we wanted to, if we've done this to everybody in this hiring round. You know what I mean? So that's what's going on behind the scenes a lot of the times. Okay, there's 29 people here. Thank you for being here. You guys are awesome. Don't let these people make you believe that you're worth far less than you actually are. What you're worth is not up to your imagination. What you're worth is based on real world evidence. So go out and get opportunities. Go out and get offers. Go out and get interviews for high paid jobs. And then you have stuff in your back pocket. You have alternatives. And the more alternatives you have, the better you will do in negotiation. Because at the end of the day, if you've got another offer for someone wanting you to pay 70, they want to pay you 70, right? And you're negotiating with these people and they're saying, no, we think you're worth 60. And you say, okay, fine. Not agreed to. We'll be in touch, because you have a better offer. You have an offer for 70. Why would you take anything less than 70? That makes negotiation very easy. Trust me. Okay. But if you don't have any other alternatives, you got nothing lined up, you got no other opportunities that you're even pursuing, let alone in the bag, that makes negotiation very hard. You only have two options: take this job or unemployment, right? Those are your only two options. And it's very hard to negotiate when those are your only two options, right? You basically have no power to negotiate. You have to take whatever they feel like giving you, or unemployment, right? So you can bluff, but be prepared for your bluff to be called. That's the problem, right? So the way to do this is you line up other options and then you negotiate. And listen, it's not a perfect world. Maybe you don't have any other offers, but if you have lots of interviews lined up for jobs that you'd like, that you're qualified for, that's something. And those jobs are paying a lot more than this one is. That's something, right? And there's no such thing as deserving higher pay. It's just what people are willing to pay you. I hate to say it, but it's true. At least that's what a lot of industries that aren't, like government is an exception to that, but that's the behaviors we see, Pofcross says, thank you for your live sessions, always informative and educational. Well, thank you, Pofcross. Thank you for letting me know this. It's getting comments like that make me want to do these. Okay, so if you have any questions or anything like that, any topics you'd like me to discuss or questions you want to ask, do it now. You've got about 30 seconds. If I don't get any more chats in the next 30 seconds, I don't have anything to talk about, so I'll probably be winding this down. But there's 25 of you here. Thank you for being here. Hopefully you're getting something out of this. Let me know what topics you'd like me to discuss in general or cover in general if you're wondering about stuff. I'm always looking for that kind of feedback because I want to speak to things that people are actually interested in hearing. Also for the topics of videos and things. I got somebody that gave me a video recommendation earlier, said make a video on this. So that's good. Usually for a lot of those topics, I will try them out in a live stream first and just see what the response is. And if nobody cares, then I probably won't do a video on it. But if a lot of people are into it, then I'll probably turn it into a video. V8 Super Special says, "Hi Bill, it happened to me once, more than once, that recruiters wanted to know if I was having other interviews at the time. Why did they do that?" There's a couple of reasons why they can do that. Now there's listen, once again, we end up with this problem where like it's a big world out there and everything happens some of the time, okay? But one reason is because they're using it as a general gauge of how valuable you are, okay? And the theory being that the more valuable people will be in demand. And so you're likely to have other offers, okay? That's one reason. Another reason is because it's kind of working against you now. It's because they don't want to start the process of extending an offer to you if you're about to accept an offer with another company, right? That's another reason they'll ask. And some people will be honest and say, "Oh yeah, I've got 2 offers right now and I'm about to accept this one on Wednesday," something like that. So you go, okay. So I'm glad I found that out, because it doesn't make sense for us to go through the work and to try and get you now that we know this, right? But there are other reasons too. Some of them are less logical or more flimsy than that. But the general rule, what I'd recommend is, you see, they're asking you about something you're doing with a third party. Like it has nothing to do with them, right? And as a result, that information, they don't have the right to that information, right? Like what you choose to do or not do with someone else, that's your business. They don't have the right to be informed about that. You know what I'm saying? So they can ask a lot of things. They can ask a lot of things that have nothing to do with them, and that they don't have the right to an answer. You don't have to tell them the truth. You don't even have to answer. Like for example, they might say, "What's your credit card number? We need that." You see, our process is we need that for your job application. You can say, "No, absolutely not. I'm sorry. I have a personal policy where I don't give that out. It's personal information. It's confidential. It can lead to issues of identity theft, etc., etc. So I do not give that out. I'm sure you understand, right?" And whatever they say, you just don't disclose it. This is kind of another one of those where it's like they're saying, "Have you received any other offers?" It's like, that's my business, and I don't see how that's relevant to our dealings, because if I have received offers, I decide what I do. I don't connect them to you. You know what I mean? So you're free to tell them if you want, but I would recommend, just as a default answer, you say, you could either say, "No, none to speak of," or you could say, "Well, I just don't generally disclose that kind of information. Just a matter of policy." Right? Because you can be sure that all these questions where they ask you about stuff that's none of their business, you can be sure that it's not for your benefit. It's to try and make them more successful at negotiating against you, or, like outmaneuvering you in some way. So it's like, no, I'm not going to give you all this stuff that is none of your business. Now, by the way, the other thing is that if you have to answer no to a question like this, they say, "We need to know this," and you say, "Sorry, I can't tell you that." It's well worth it to learn how to respond professionally and cordially when you say these things, because you don't want to say, "No, absolutely not. That's none of your business," and get really upset. And all of a sudden they're thinking like, "Okay, I'm glad we asked that, because it now seems that this person has issues with communication and interpersonal interaction. We might have to revisit if we really want to hire this person," right? Now I feel, as a recruiter, I feel really awkward, and I feel really, upset, and I don't enjoy dealing with this candidate anymore. Is that a good sign? Right? So when you say no, learn how to do it professionally and properly in a very disarming way that makes people not hate you, okay? Or doesn't create a ton of awkwardness. right? It really does help to have a smile on your face, or a grin or whatever you call this. Like, instead of, like, no, and being visibly upset, right? A lot of younger people haven't figured that out yet. A lot of younger people are whizzes at this stuff, far more than me, but a lot of them haven't figured this out yet. That stuff does matter. So make sure you're doing it. Bob says, thank you. You're absolutely welcome, Bob. Amaze says, hi, Bill. How much of negotiation power does one have when homely experienced but laid off? What does homely experienced mean? Can you, you said it right here. When highly experienced. Okay. Sorry. When highly experienced but laid off. Well, that has nothing to do with how much negotiation power you have. The negotiation power comes from how many options you have. So look, like I said before, if your only two options are A, accept whatever they want to pay you, or B, unemployment, right? If those are your only two options, A and B, you really don't have any negotiating power, right? The only negotiating power you might have is if you try to bluff them, but that can backfire very easily, right? Okay, so you don't have any real power. Now, if you had A, B, and C, you had whatever they want to offer you, B, unemployment, or C, you've got another job offer for a certain amount, well, that gives you a lot of negotiating power. They can't offer you less than this other job offer because one way or another, you're not going to work for less than that, right? So that gives you the power to say, absolutely not, I need this much or more. And it's not a bluff. If you don't want to pay me that, you don't think I'm worth that, okay, I'll take this other offer. You're wanting to pay me 30. These people are wanting to pay me 40. I've got their offer in my hand. So you need to do better than 40, right? That gives you the power to say that. And then whether they accept it or they believe you, who cares? Because one way or another, you're not working for them for less than 40. Not when you got an offer in your hand for 40 from somewhere else, right? It's not about persuasion. It's about having options. So get yourself some options, and that's what gives you power. Yeah, Bob's got the right idea. Now, listen, I know, like I said earlier, you might not have multiple job offers at once. Like, I get it. But if you have a lot of other things lined up, if your schedule for next week and the next 2 weeks are full of job interviews, then you might have some bargaining power. Those jobs are paying a lot more than what they're offering you. So nothing is certain in this case, but you have chances of these things materializing into an actual job. So that's something, right? Or you could just take what you have and then you accept their job offer for whatever low amount, and then you continue your job search, but as you're working for these people. If you honestly feel that, you're worth 50 or something and these people are paying you 30, but you have no other job offers, you have the option of taking the job for 30. It's better than doing your job search, where you're making 0, and then continue your job search, maybe part-time, while you're making 30. And then hopefully in the short term, you'll get something even better, right? That's another option. So you don't have to be crippled by your lack of negotiating power. You're still working a plan. And when you get another job offer, you're comparing. Now you've got more than one option. You have unemployment, you have staying where you currently are for 30, or you have this other offer. So you also have 3. So one way or another, you're not going to move down, you can only move up. V8 Super Special. Thanks, Bill. What I usually said was, this was in response to, if you were having other interviews. You usually said was along the lines of, let's say I'm having none at the moment. I guess it was still a bit too. So listen, there is no right or wrong answer, and it depends on the situation. you don't know what the motivation is behind that question. So it's hard to know the perfect way to answer when you don't really know why they're asking it. I mean, you can play the odds and say, well, this is usually the reason they ask, but it could be this or it could be that. You know, don't judge yourself too hard. Experience is a good teacher. So if that did not go well, or you didn't get the offer, maybe next time try a different answer. Like try saying, no, I refuse to answer, or so, you know what I mean? But I don't know. I would think twice about just like giving them all this information for stuff that has nothing to do with you. So as long as you were polite and you didn't make them feel awkward or regret asking, I think it's all good. Okay, we have 23 people here. Thank you for being here. I have another one of these on Friday, so you can come back then if you have anything else. But for the people that are here, if you're having problems getting a job and you're looking for a job right now, and if your job search is not going anywhere fast, check out that course. There is a link to it in the description box below this video, below this live stream. Check that out. Alternatively, if you are looking for a job that's maybe a bit higher up and you're wanting to move into management, move into maybe executive management, check out that course, because that's some of the skills you have to tack on, generally speaking, to be qualified for those types of jobs. And even if it's not an absolute requirement in your industry or your situation, you will perform better knowing that stuff. So check that out. There are links to these in the description box under this live stream. And I've also made videos, like I said before, I've also made videos that are like FAQs, where I talk about what these courses are, what you get out of them, how it works. So you understand all that stuff, so you can make a more informed decision on what you're getting into. I've had a lot of people that have taken both of these, especially that one. So check that out. Of all the courses I have, that's probably the shortest. This would be the longest by far. This is kind of in between. It's got a few different things in it. It's got the networking stuff. It's got how to do informational interviews. It's got how to tap the hidden job market, as well as like the conventional stuff, how to fix up your LinkedIn profile, how to do your resume, how to do job interviews. A lot of the job interview stuff is similar to what I have on my YouTube channel. I don't go too far beyond it because I've pretty much covered it all. But it gives you all the stuff around that. Getting hired on the posted job market and getting hired on the hidden job market. So if any of that stuff's of any interest to you, check that out. Links in the description. Bob says, I usually say something like, I'm talking with various folks. Okay, that's like a halfway house kind of answer. Yep. So if that works for you, great. That would not be what I would go to. My default response would be like, I just don't disclose that. Sorry. Rather than saying something, I would say, no, there's no answer. And there you go. Okay. Well, thank you to everybody who's here. You guys are awesome. I wish you nothing but the best. I wish you all the luck in the world in your job search endeavors or your career climbing endeavors, if that's where you're coming from. I will be back on Friday with another episode of Honest HR Nitrous, where we could talk about what's really going on with a lot of the stuff. And on Monday, I'm back with some of my other stuff, like the Monday live stream I do, which is for entrepreneurs. If you are wanting to start a side hustle or anything like that, I talk about that stuff too. That's kind of my core competency, is like talking about business and growing businesses. So I still do that, even though like less people on this channel are here for the entrepreneurship stuff. I still like doing that. And I will have videos too. So you guys are awesome. Thanks very much. I wish you nothing but the best, and I will see you very soon. Take care.